Morning. Turn to Genesis chapter 32 with me. Genesis 32. Over and over again in the book of Genesis, God chooses someone and then he blesses them because through them he wants to bless the rest of the world. Maybe the most famous example of this is in the beginning of Genesis 12, when God appears to Abram, later Abraham, and he promises to bless him, and that through him all the nations of the earth would be blessed. Well, God does the same thing with Isaac, Abraham's son, and then with Jacob, Isaac's son. So God has committed himself to this family. He's chosen this family to bless them because through them he will bless the world. And so he sticks with them through thick and thin. But what may surprise you, if you haven't read Genesis in a while, is that there is a lot of thin. there's some thick and thin through this, but there's a lot of thin with these biblical heroes. Abram has his bad moments. Isaac also has his bad moments. But then Jacob, Isaac's son and Abraham's grandson, well, Jacob is complicated. If you read Jacob's story, he's been fighting since the womb. When he and his twin brother Esau were in the womb of their mother, she complains because they're constantly fighting. And then, when they're born, they come out, and Jacob is holding on to Esau's heel. It's almost as if he was fighting to be the first one, the older brother, to come out of the womb. He's fighting, and he's been fighting ever since. In fact, the name Jacob literally means heel grabber. So he got his name from the way that he was born. He was grabbing onto the heel of Esau, trying to win, trying to be first. It means the deceiver. He's been deceiving his way through his whole life, scratching, clawing, scheming his way toward this blessing. This blessing. Now what's crazy about Jacob is that since before he was born, God has promised that he would be blessed. He's chosen Jacob. When their mom is complaining about these two babies fighting inside of her, God appears to her and he says, look, these two babies inside of you are actually two nations. We'll talk more about that later. But then he says that the younger one will actually rule over the older one. The older one will serve the younger. Esau will serve Jacob. So from before he was ever even born, Jacob is the chosen one. He is blessed. He is chosen by God. But then, with the way that he lives his life, at least at first, you might not realize that. At first, he pulls off these two shady deals with Esau, his brother. And the first one, he steals, essentially, his brother's rightful inheritance. And then in the second one, he deceives their old, blind father on his deathbed out of giving his brother the blessing. He cheats Esau out of his father's blessing, steals it for himself. So Esau realizes one day that he actually has grown to hate his own brother. And he decides that he's going to murder his brother in cold blood. So Jacob's mother, or both of their mother, Rebekah, catches wind of this. And Rebekah, Jacob's always been her favorite son, and she hears of this. And more than just saving her son or helping them to come back together again in a peaceful way, she sides with Jacob yet again. And she cheats together. They outwit Esau and cheat him again of a blessing. And then Jacob flees the country. He gets out of Dodge because he knows that Esau is on the rampage after him. So by the time we get to Genesis 32, that was 20 years ago. And in the 20 years since, Jacob has taken on 4 wives, even though he really only loves one of them. And he's been with Laban, his father-in-law. And in Laban, he has met his deceiving match. They have been in this weird tug-of-war, going back and forth for 20 years, each one of them trying to outwit the other one, each of them crafty, trying to win. And through it all, God blesses Jacob. He preserves him, protects him, he blesses him. And so Laban has finally had enough. He knows that he's crafty, he knows what he's doing, he's gotten a few over on Jacob. But he realizes that he's never going to win with this God on Jacob's side. And so God appears to Jacob and he tells him, look, it's time to get out of Dodge again. It's going downhill. Laban's really angry. And so he tells Jacob, it's time to go home. It's time to return to your homeland. So Jacob begins the journey. And he sends messengers ahead of him to Esau, to his brother, to tell Esau that he's coming home. His beloved brother is coming back home and, let's bury the hatchet. It's time. Well, then the messengers return. And by the way, they also brought gifts to Esau. But apparently it wasn't enough because they return to Jacob and they tell him that Esau is so excited that he's coming, that he's actually coming to meet you on the way. And he's coming with 400 men, okay? So if you're Jacob, you hear this. And you're not thinking that these are 400 close friends of Esau who are coming to celebrate this emotional reunion and support the brothers. No, you're hearing, okay, last time I saw Esau, he wanted to kill me. And he didn't even realize that I was going to cheat him again. And so now I'm coming back 20 years later, and he's coming at me with 400 men. And so if you're Jacob, you're thinking, oh boy, Esau's coming to finish this job, right? What he should have done 20 years ago is about to happen now. And so by the time we get to Genesis 32, Jacob is in between a rock and a hard place because he's coming from Laban, who's not his biggest fan at all, and he's running right into the waiting arms of Esau, who is definitely not his biggest fan. So he's between this rock and a hard place. And according to the chronology, if you follow it in Genesis, Jacob and Esau are 97 years old at this point. So Jacob is 97 years old. And he's about to have the night of his life because there is a special story here in Genesis 32 that we're going to talk about today. Throughout his life, throughout all of this deception and heel grabbing and fighting, God refuses to abandon Jacob. He sticks with him. Through all of that thin, he sticks with him. He holds on to him. And Jacob is about to find out just how real that is here in Genesis 32. Jim read it for us. He sends his wives, his children, all of his belongings across the Jabbok River. Now Esau, let's say that this is the Jabbok River, the center aisle, okay? Now Jacob and his clan are coming from this side. Esau and his clan are coming from this side. So when Jacob sends his family and his belongings across the Jabbok, he's committed. He's finally going to face his past. He's meeting Esau. Everything's on this side of the Jabbok River. Now this river is an impediment to him and not to Esau, right? So he sends everyone across. And then in verse 24, Jacob was left alone. So there's no Rebekah, no mom looking out for him. There's no angel appearing to him and soothing him like has happened earlier in his life. There's no comforting vision from God like has also happened earlier in his life. He's all alone for what's about to happen. A man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. Now, there's a lot that goes on in this passage that, at least at first, is very strange. It's very mysterious. And if you're like me and you have those curious questions, just hold on to them because we're going to talk about those tonight. So we're holding on to the mystery until 5 p.m., okay? But for now, I want us to look at this and realize that this moment is about more than just this moment. This wrestling match is a microcosm of Jacob's entire life because up to this point, he has been wrestling with God, with humans. He's been wrestling for his whole time on this earth. And now, maybe on the last night of his life, before he's about to meet Esau on the next day, now all of those demons are becoming embodied. The demons that he's been wrestling with for all of his 97 years are embodied in this man that he's wrestling with on the banks of the Jabbok. In fact, on the next slide, we just have 2 slides today. It's really basic, but on the next slide, and I know that the writing is small. You don't have to try to read it. It's just the text that you're looking at in your Bible. But if you can see the highlights that are over some of the words on the screen, you'll notice that there are some pink highlights and some brown highlights. Now, the pink highlights are over. This is a special thing that's happening in this text. So I wanted to point it out. If you'll just let me be nerdy for just a second, there are these words that all the pink words are either the name Jacob or rhyme with the name Jacob in Hebrew, which is the original language of this, right? So all of these words are directly tied in with the name Jacob. And then the brown highlights are just pointing out where the word name appears or named appears, the verb. So all over this text, and this is just part of the text, all over this text, is pointing to the fact that all of this is about Jacob, and more than that, it's about Jacob's name. Now remember, the name Jacob means heel grabber, right? It means deceiver. So the point of this is that the deceiver is coming to meet his match, right? That's what's going to happen here. The deceiver is finally here on this night, before he faces the next day, faces Esau, he's meeting his match. His name is coming to fruition. And just to boil this down, so you have the name Jacob, and you might have already noticed the name Jabbok. That's one of the words that even in English, right, translates or rhymes with each other. Well, also the verb for wrestle rhymes. So you could say that Jacobed at the Jabbok, okay? So Jacob is just a form of the word for wrestle. So Jacobed at the Jabbok. So the point, this is very intentional. The point is to say that what's going on here is a microcosm of Jacob's entire life. That this wrestling match, this one night, is just the embodiment of the 97 years prior to this in his life. So Jacob is wrestling at the Jabbok. He's Jacobing at the Jabbok. You can just go back to the last slide, Kim. So all night, the man is wrestling with Jacob. Literally, they're stirring up dust, the word means. In verse 25, when the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched his hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. Okay, again, this may be bringing up questions. Hold on to those. Because he can apparently, from touching him, he can throw his hip joint out of socket, right? Now that's fighting dirty. We can see that just from what we can see, right? But there's a layer here that we might miss that the original readers would not have missed, and that is that when he touches his hip socket, it seems to be a euphemism for the scrotum. Okay, so in other words, he punches him where the sun don't shine. He's fighting beneath the belt right here. All right, so that's what's happening, and he does it so powerfully that his hip is thrown out of socket. So there's this incredible power that's at play with this man. Now this is important. We're not just talking about this because I don't enjoy talking about it more than you do, but it's important because this is the center of the blessing. If you recall, Genesis 1 and then Genesis 12, the blessing centers around the offspring of this family, right? God tells Abram, for instance, that your offspring will be like the sand and the sea, like the stars in the sky. It's limitless. So it centers around the offspring of this family. So there's, especially in this culture as well, fertility was hugely important, valued incredibly highly. And so striking at this particular part of Jacob's body, is showing him, demonstrating to him that he is not in control. That this blessing that he's been scratching and clawing and fighting for his entire life, that he wants to win for himself, that God is just trying to freely give to him, it's demonstrating to him that he's not in control. That all this wrestling, all this fighting is never going to win him the true blessing that he wants. Because only God can give it to him. So that's the message that he receives. Now, thankfully for us, the narrator doesn't dwell on this because what actually is the point of this story is maybe what's less interesting to us, but that's the dialogue that comes after this. So these two wrestlers are wrestling all night, and if we can maybe put a layer of our reading onto this, they're breathless, they're evenly matched, neither one of them can beat the other. Even after the hip has been thrown out of joint, Jacob keeps wrestling. So they're breathless and they're reduced to talking it out. I don't know about you, but I've experienced that with my brother growing up, that we would fight, and then, I obviously won all the time, but the one time when I didn't win, hypothetically, we had to talk it out, right? So that's what happens here. He says, "Let me go, for the day has broken." My brother definitely beat me up. I should clarify that. For the day is broken. But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." Okay, here's our word. Bless me, right? Even after this full night of fighting, even after Jacob's hip is just hanging out of its socket, he wants this blessing. He's as stubborn and focused as he has been for his entire life. He wants that blessing. And so he asks for it, and he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." Now, names mean a lot in the Bible. My name is Daniel. That doesn't necessarily mean anything about my character. But in the Bible, names frequently mean something. The meaning of the name says something about who the person is. We already talked about how Jacob means heel grabber, means deceiver. And you can see that embodied within Jacob in the way that he lives his life. He is grabbing at heels. That literally comes from the image of trying to trip someone. It's like you're on the ground because you got tripped, but you're not going to let them win. So you're grabbing at their heel, trying to trip them, to keep them from winning. Anything winning at all costs. That's what Jacob is about. And so his name is a perfect fit for how his life has gone. From the womb, he has been fighting. And every moment since has been about no holds barred victory. And so, actually, earlier on, I think it's just chapter 27, Esau is sick of Jacob's games, and he asks this question. He says, is he not rightly named Jacob? In other words, you called it, right? Like, you knew that this boy is just deceiving through his entire life. He's grabbing at heels. He is rightly named Jacob. Now, what's interesting is that if you were to go back in Genesis and just start in chapter 31 and just keep going back, you'll see that for the past 20 years, more than 20 years, Jacob has actually never said his own name. Now, you Bible students might remember that when he's deceiving his father and he's pretending to be Esau, right? And he puts the animal skins on because Esau apparently is a very hairy person, and he tries to smell like Esau. And so Isaac is blind at this point, their father, and he feels the skin. And he's like, well, he's hairy, he must be Esau. So he deceives him. But he asks him, who is it, right? So he asks, he's about to bless him, so he wants to know that this is Esau, the right brother that he's blessing. And in that moment, Jacob makes this choice. He's pretending to be Esau this whole time, but he verbalizes it, and he says, I'm Esau. And from that moment, he in the narrative, until now, he's never said his name. Actually, at one point, he meets the love of his life, and when he's introducing himself to her, he says, I am a relative of your father, which we're going to gloss right over that. That's another question for another time. He says, I'm a relative of your father and the son of Rebekah. So he introduces himself not even with his own name, but with his relationships. So for 20 years, more than 20 years, Jacob, in the narrative, has never said his own name. So when this man asks, what is your name? That's the exact question that Jacob's been running from for decades now. Not the literal question of revealing your name, but the fact that this name reveals something about who he is. It reveals his character, his shadow side, that he doesn't want the world to see. What is your name? So when he replies, Jacob, is saying more than just like the name tag that says, hello, my name is Jacob, right? He's admitting to something. And now he could have lied in the darkness of that night, right? Just like he lied in the darkness of his father's sight back in the day. He could have lied. But he responds. He says, Jacob. In that moment, he's taking off this mask. He's not Esau, pretending to be at least. He's not just his mother's son, as she's looking out for him, protecting him, guiding him. He's not just Laban's longtime employee. He is the heel grabber. He is the deceiver. And now he's home. So he's revealing who he is. Deep down, he knows. I am the deceiver. In verse 28, the man says, your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel. For you have striven with God and with men, and have prevailed. Of course he's prevailed, right? Jacob is a prevailer. He is a winner. In spite of everything, he will win. He might lose the battle, but he's going to win the war. And so God says, I got to hand it to you, Israel. Now the name Israel means that God strives, God fights, God wrestles. I got to hand it to you, God wrestles. So Jacob has been fighting with God and with people his entire life. And now it's recognized. And this is what makes Jacob so frustratingly relatable. Because I also want to win. And so do you. I don't know. Your winning in your life probably looks somewhat different than whatever it means for me to win in my life. But we all want to win. We want to be blessed, right? We want to hold on to whatever blessing that is. I should say that this blessing, it can look very different for a lot of us. We don't use this word very often, right? Just when someone sneezes, maybe in church, and maybe you drop a bless your heart every now and again, but that's about it, right? That's the extent of our use of it. But for them, this was like an all-encompassing word that meant that flourishing was happening, that God and the earth and the humans between the two were living in unity and in abundance. So it meant that you were prospering, you were safe, you had offspring, as we talked about. It meant that you were abounding in life. And that's what he wants. And that's what we all want. And whatever manifestation of it appears in our lives, we want to be blessed. We want to win at life. And if you're like me, we don't want to leave it up to other people to determine whether or not we will win. I don't want to trust my destiny to the hands of someone else, even to God. I don't like trusting someone else with what I want to control. So, Jacob here is not just the man Jacob. He's also Israel. He is the father of the nation, the people group, Israel. This is their origin story. So he is Jacob, the man. He's also Israel, the nation here, but he's also all of us. Because in the New Testament, Paul, for instance, calls the church the new Israel. He says that we've been grafted into the story of this people. So this story is our story. So this is the man Jacob, but it's also the nation Israel, and it's also you and me. So it's not just him, it's not just them, it's us. That's what God told Rebekah when she was complaining about those two babies wrestling around in her womb. He says, look, those two babies are not just babies. Of course they are. But he says that they're in whatever sense, they are nations inside of you. That Jacob and Esau are nations inside of your womb. They are Israel and Edom. They're red states and blue states. They're liberals and conservatives. They are embodying the divided human condition, the tribes that we divide ourselves up into. And not just the tribes on a social level, but also just at the family level, at the individual level. Jacob embodies for us, Jacob and Esau together embody for us the sibling rivalries of mom always liked you more, right? And then in response, yeah, but dad gave you everything you wanted. They embody that. They embody that the system is broken, that I just have to go out and get what's mine because the system's not going to give it to me. They embody that, for instance, with Jacob, marriage is complicated, and he doesn't do it right most of the time. And then he has this in-law that is really troubling him throughout his entire life to boot. So he's embodying this human struggle, this human condition. So that's Jacob, that's Esau, and even more than that maybe, that's you and me. We're here, we're there, we find ourselves in him. So here he is, and here we are. Take us or leave us, right? Take him or leave him. And the astonishing thing is that God takes him. After all of that, after the past 97 years, God still takes him. And I mean that in two ways. In one way, he takes him as in he fights him, right? He takes him on. But also in the sense that he accepts him. God sees him, understands, and he stays. Even when he could have abandoned him. He promises him. This is initially where the phrase, I'll never leave you, I'll never forsake you, comes from. He stays with Jacob. He cares enough to put on the boxing gloves, right? He's committed to this person and says that if it takes a fight, if you want to pick a fight, if I need to pick a fight, I will. I'm here. He takes Jacob. My question for you, for me, if this man in this text, as he's called, if he asked you the same question, what is your name? What would you say? Of course, you would say your actual name, right? My name's Brad. My name's Wendell. My name's Lisa, right? I'm going to say my actual name. But this question's deeper than that, isn't it? It is here. And I think if he were asking you this, it would also be for you. Because Jacob is the heel grabber. He's the deceiver. That's what his name means. That's who he is. And maybe that's you. Maybe you're scratching and clawing and scheming your way through life, always trying to get ahead. Or maybe you just passively accept life. It's easier to go along to get along and never quite muster up the courage to wrestle with life. Maybe you just hold everything in, all of the sorrows, the injustices, the fears, the joys, the giggles even of life. You hold it all in because it's easier to push it down than to risk you being pinned down in this wrestling match. Or maybe you're hot-headed and you don't hold anything in, and you allow what's inside to bubble over, and you end up hurting the people around you emotionally, spiritually, even physically. And you would never take the time to show up for a wrestling match with God, because to do that would mean that you have to look in the mirror and to address the lake of fire that's bubbling up inside of you. What's your name? Jacob responds. He owns it in this moment. He owns his shadow side. So what's yours? No one else can answer that for you or for me. No one can take our spot on the bank of the Jabbok, right? There's no Rebekah protecting Jacob in this moment. He has to show up for himself. And it's scary, but it's also worth it. Because our God is a wrestler. Israel. God wrestles. And he wants that for his people. Now, it's not about winning. That's how Jacob tended to think of it. But God knows the end of the story, right? We know now the end of the story. We know that Jesus comes to earth, that he puts his time in on the wrestling mat, and that he emerges victorious, that he beats sin and death and the grave and shame and guilt and fear and whatever else that's on our shadow side. He's beat it. He's won. So we don't have to win. We win in him, right? So we don't have to focus on winning. It's not about the victory. It's about showing up. It's about being real with God. It's about more than just putting on makeup and deodorant, hopefully, and sitting in a church pew, right? It's about more than that. It's about showing up with who you really are, to give yourself over to this wrestling match with God. It's to ask the questions, genuinely to sit and wrestle with them, of who am I? And why is the world the way that it is? Why is there so much pain and sorrow and brokenness and death in our world? And where is all of this going when it seems so random and painful? And what am I supposed to be doing with any of it, right? It's to ask these questions and to be okay with not having the answer, but to wrestle with them, to wrestle with our God in the way that he is fighting. I think for you, for me, this is our call, even when it feels like I don't have any of it figured out. Even when it feels like I'm clueless and alone in the world. But it's also our call when I feel like I have it all figured out. When I feel like I'm on top of the world and that no one can question me. On whatever side of that you're on this morning or somewhere in the middle, this call is for you and it's for me. To humble ourselves, to get down on that wrestling mat one more time, and to do the same thing tomorrow. To take up our cross, to take the language of Jesus and follow him. If you need to respond this morning, won't you do it as we stand and sing together?